Welcome to Alpha Kappa Phi's webinar titled Maintaining Fraternal Values Across Web-Based Platforms. This webinar is part of the Risk Management series. My name is Mackenzie Lauka, and I serve AK Phi as the Associate Director of Education. I will be your moderator today. Before we begin, I'd like to go over a few logistics regarding the audio and web-based features of today's program. In order to verify attendance, you should have linked to the GoToWebinar meeting room through the web link provided in your confirmation email. To access the PowerPoint handout, as well as the supplemental documents available, click the plus sign next to Handouts on your screen. Click the name of the handout to download the file. This webinar will be advanced remotely, and at the end of the program, I'll explain how you can ask a question to either of our panelists. If you have a question throughout the program, feel free to type it into the question box on your screen or tweet it using the hashtag AKPhiChat. Your questions will be asked at the end of the program. Be sure to also check out our social media content. Portions of today's program will be tweeted using the hashtag AKPhiChat. You may also find some valuable resources on the AKPhi blog, Facebook page, Instagram feed, LinkedIn page, Twitter feed, and our YouTube channel. This webinar has been created to discuss maintaining our fraternal values when using web-based platforms. Being a member of Alpha Kappa Phi isn't restrictive to when you're wearing your letters. Your actions, comments, and responses, both in person and online, are reflective of your character and the fraternity. Today we will learn what is and is not acceptable when it comes to publication and posting online. In addition to covering these topics, we'll leave time for your questions and comments on the subject matter. For our program today, we have two presenters who are going to provide guidance and support while also provoking thoughts and awareness so you walk away from today's program with new insight on the topic. At this point, I'd like to introduce our presenters. Allison Moore is a consultant at Willis Towers Watson in Atlanta, Georgia. She has more than 18 years of experience in the employee benefits industry with emphasis on health analytics. She also leads campus recruiting for her local area. She has a passion for big data and risk management. Allison has also been a member of Alpha Kappa Phi since 1994, is a past Alpha Kappa Phi South Central Regional Director, and currently serves as a Judiciary Committee member. Andy Houston serves as Executive Director of Sigma Alpha Mu Fraternity, a historically Jewish fraternity with chapters on more than 50 campuses. He has previously served as Director of Business Development for Willow Marketing, a full-service marketing agency based in Indianapolis. Prior to joining the team at Willow, he served as Vice President of Operations for the North American Interfraternity Conference, managing events, communications, media relations, marketing, and digital media. And he has also worked for a charitable foundation and a membership organization leading meeting planning and marketing efforts. Besides being on Facebook since 2004 and being named one of the top social media influencers in Indianapolis, Andy regularly develops social strategies, coaches association leaders, and presents on social media topics. He even served on the Interactive Committee for Super Bowl. Now to get started with the presentation, I'll hand it off to Allison.
Thanks, Mackenzie. Before we jump into maintaining our values and portraying our character, let's talk about what those mean. When you pledged Alpha Kappa Phi, you learned our fraternity has 5 core values: brotherhood, knowledge, integrity, service, and unity. These values are what we as a fraternity have decided are important attributes to being a principal business leader and with which our members should identify. This doesn't mean there aren't other values that are important to being a business leader, and you personally may have additional values you feel are necessary to being a good brother and a strong leader. Values are extremely personal as they reflect our character and how we want to act and be perceived. So understanding the values you strive to live by and why those values are important to you takes time and thought. Now, our core values, meaning those values which are central to ourselves, don't change that frequently. Over time, a few of them may become more or less important as we graduate college, experience major events such as the birth of a child or the death of a parent, and as our responsibilities change. But generally, your values are going to stay consistent. Understanding and knowing what those values are will help you as you start your career and search for opportunities, as well as develop relationships with other people. Having similar values with your friends and family and the company you work for is important to feeling appreciated and your success. As we discuss the relevance of the Internet and the role web-based platforms play in our lives, keep in mind the values important to you and whether or not you think you do a good job portraying them in your everyday life.
Most of you listening right now have probably had some sort of social media or networking platform for the majority of your life. You may have taught a parent or a grandparent how to use one of these platforms. Growing up as a digital native, you might think you know how these things work and what is and isn't okay. What's the worst thing that can happen? Well, actually a lot. Let's illustrate a few that we've seen in various news outlets over the last few years. This great photo, right? In 2013, a Taco Bell employee took a photograph of himself licking a stack of taco shells and posted it to his Facebook account. Seeing that image with a clear lack of hygiene, do you think you're going to eat at Taco Bell anytime soon? I don't think so. So not only did this employee end up losing his job, but he's likely cost his company profit. In 2013, you see this tweet. The NRA said, "Good morning, shooters. Happy Friday. Weekend plans?" Well, that doesn't seem bad on its face, but this was immediately followed by a firestorm from people on Twitter complaining against that company for their insensitivity. The reason why is the context. The tweet was posted the same day as the shooting in Aurora, Colorado. Just this past year in 2015, a job seeker with offers from both Zenefits and Uber, who went to social question and answer site Quora for advice on which offer to take. There, she posted her question and listed a con of Zenefits, that it wasn't a buzzword like Uber, as you can see. The CEO of Zenefits was savvy enough to be on Quora and saw the question and actually rescinded that job offer. So each of these instances isn't isolated, and situations like this continue to happen every day. The reason for this webinar today is to illustrate some of the risk associated with having social networking sites and how to minimize that risk by being able to maintain your values when you're using these web-based platforms.
Web-based platforms. We've mentioned that phrase a few times already tonight, and it's in the title of the webinar. But what exactly is a web-based platform? Well, when we think about communication on the internet, the first thing most of us think of is social media sites. They're such a huge part of our daily lives and the way we communicate that they're really an extension of who we are. Author Jon Acuff mentions in an article on CNBC that social media is your resume. That's partially true. Our social media profiles are the public areas of the internet we share with other users, and they all help create our digital brands and the way we're perceived. They aren't, however, the only web platforms we use for communication. For our purposes, web-based platforms are any platform which relies on the internet or has a connection to the internet to communicate with others and share information. So this would include things like text messaging, email, instant messaging, video conferencing, and more. For the majority of the content we're going to discuss, it will focus on social media sites, but keep in mind the issues we talk about can apply to any web-based platform, and we should aim to maintain our values across each of them.
As you mentioned earlier, Allison, our values directly relate to our character. What we believe is important is going to feed into the way that we act and how we communicate. Sometimes it's hard enough to be able to maintain your values in person, but as we're going to talk about today, it's an entirely different ability to maintain your values on the internet. In terms of time, the internet hasn't been around for very long, and social media an even shorter amount of time. A large number of the population still remembers a time in their life when the internet and these digital platforms didn't exist, and they actually had to go to the library to look up research in an encyclopedia. So, on the other hand, there's also this new generation who only knows a world where Facebook and Google exist. With the emergence of these social platforms and the increase in availability of technology, the way we communicate with one another has also shifted. Years ago, we were restricted to face-to-face communication or phone calls. If the person you wanted to talk to was busy, you had to wait. With the onset of the internet and social media, however, we can send someone an email, a text, a tweet, a Snapchat, a wall post, or any other form of communication at any time of the day, whether or not the person that we were sending was able to look at it right away or even wanted to talk to you. This creates both a lot of benefits and some concerns. While it's great to be able to work on your own time, send thoughts and communications as you think of it, and also not have to worry about conflicting schedules, we have to balance that with constant access to one another and the ability to be connected 24/7. We've begun to expect immediacy in responses. We might think we have patience, but how often have you gotten frustrated when you notice a friend hasn't texted you back, but you see that they're posting or tweeting and kind of ignoring you? We've developed this expectation without even realizing it. With our constant access to the internet, it hasn't only affected the way and our want to communicate, but our need to communicate. The number of social media sites has increased, as has the time that we spend on them. A few years ago, everyone had a MySpace or Facebook page. Some of you don't know what MySpace is. That's okay. Maybe you had both. But not many people had more than that, or a few profiles on a few sites. Now, it's not uncommon for someone to have Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, LinkedIn, Periscope, YouTube, Kick, Vine, Instagram, and many more that are in use every day. With all of these different platforms and our constant connection, it's really easy to get caught up in the technology and not always keep our actions aligned with our values. Sometimes the fallout might be small, such as losing a few followers for posting comments on politics with which our friends might disagree, but other times the consequence could be greater. And as technology usage continues to increase, there are more and more instances where what you post could get you in trouble.
To help protect you and the fraternity, Alpha Kappa Psi has a risk management policy on publication in the Board of Directors Statement of Policy. The publication of inappropriate material policy prohibits members from producing, publishing, and or distributing any material, whether written or electronically, such as text, audio, video, or some combination of those, that could be deemed harmful to the good name and reputation of the fraternity. So what does that really mean? Essentially, it means don't create, post, or share anything portraying a negative image. This could be in print, an item such as a rush flyer or poster, a brochure, other marketing materials, or digitally, such as a recruitment video, social media post, or a blog post. The policy is limited to chapter accounts and materials, but personal ones as well. As long as you are a member of Alpha Kappa Psi, your actions represent the fraternity, whether or not you put AK Psi's name on a document or add a hashtag to a picture. So anytime you create something, think about the content and the image that it's portraying. Now, you ask, what's considered a negative image? We all have varying ideas of what's acceptable, and there really isn't an exhaustive list of what's harmful and what isn't. And your perception of something is going to be very different from, or could be very different from the person sitting next to you. Their opinion could be different from the person next to them. So it's really difficult to set a strict guideline to follow. Now, some cases are pretty clear, such as if it goes against any of our other policies or illustrates anything illegal, then don't post it. Other instances will be less clear and will require you to use your best judgment. Now we're going to give you a few examples and have you answer on the screen whether or not you think it illustrates a positive or negative image. The first image we have is of a group of members volunteering at a community garden. Go ahead and vote now whether or not you think this exhibits a positive or negative image. This is absolutely a positive image. It reflects our core value of service and is a great image to share. Volunteer work is always wonderful to showcase.
The next image that we have is a group of newly initiated members celebrating the end of pledging with alcohol. Go ahead, vote now on whether or not you think this exhibits a positive or negative image. Okay. The majority of you are saying negative, and while there may be some positive elements such as being initiated as members, we agree that this is a negative image. Even if you are 21 and it isn't illegal for you to drink, AK Psi is a professional fraternity and should not be linked to partying or alcohol.
Lastly, we have an image of a member carrying jugs of water during a charity event. Go ahead and vote now whether or not you think this exhibits a positive or a negative image. Yep, the majority of you consider this as a positive image, and we would agree. Now, without a caption, the image might be a little confusing as to what is happening and why she's carrying jugs of water. But it does illustrate the extent of dedication this chapter goes through to put on their event. Each year they host this gala and raise thousands of dollars for charity. Fundraising and charity are great images to share. In Alpha Kappa Psi, we see a great variety of images associated with our members. Of the cases the Judiciary Committee reviews and counsels members about, the biggest issues we see deal with alcohol and parties, but there is no predicting what might come across our plate. It may seem like a good idea at the time, but before you post anything, consider the ramifications. Is that comment or picture still going to seem funny when it costs you your membership or even a job offer?
You just made a really good point there, Allison. Your values and the content you post not only reflect on the fraternity, but also your future. When you post something on the internet, it's there indefinitely, and anybody can come back days, weeks, even years later and find it, including recruiters. Recruiters will review your social media presence before hiring you. A survey done by the recruiting platform of JobVite in 2015 found that 93% of recruiters looked at the social media profiles of a prospective hire before extending an offer. You might think that changing your profile name or making your account private will prevent them from finding you, but if they want to find you, they will, trust me. And if they truly can't find you, that also sends up some red flags that you're trying to hide something. Many of the same topics that go against Alpha Kappa Psi's policies, such as questionable and inappropriate content, are the same things that recruiters don't want to see and could cost you a job or an internship offer. Additionally, what you say can hurt you even if you don't think it will. So here are a few examples that I've come across. Don't badmouth employees or coworkers online. Not only could this get you fired, but if a recruiter sees that you're talking poorly about former employers, what's to stop them from thinking that you'll talk the same way about them? Remember when you told your boss that you were sick and couldn't come to work because you wanted to go to a concert with your friends? Did you think twice before posting a picture from that concert? Social media now gives employers and recruiters the ability to sleuth and catch you in a lie, even if you think you're lying for a good reason, such as why you were let go from a previous job. If there's evidence on the internet against what you say, it might call your integrity into question. I know this next one might be making you twitch a little bit, just seeing it on the screen, but having proper spelling and grammar may seem trivial, but it does show the necessary need for attention to detail. Everyone falls victim to the occasional typo, but if you consistently have poor grammar in your post, a recruiter will see that as a lack of attention to detail. No matter what your job, you're going to have some sort of communication with others, both inside and outside of your company. If you have poor grammar online, what's to stop it from spilling over into your professional work and portray a lesser image of your company because you didn't take the time to review your work? Bullying is another issue. It's a major issue. You see it all the time. Someone posts a comment about race, gender, or religion, and it starts a heated argument. Discriminatory comments can cause a great deal of harm. When it comes to the internet, it's best to keep controversial issues to yourself. The other thing that I've noted recently in working with some college students, you find a hashtag and you see who's talking about your fraternity or organization. You scroll through and you want to learn more about them, so you kind of click on their profile and you scroll through their Instagram feed. And I've even come across some students who aren't in the state of Colorado or California that have marijuana on their social media feed. Having illegal things posted is an immediate red flag that there's maybe other problems at hand. And that's awkward to confront, but I think it's important that we do it. So if you see your friends posting things that are going to cause concern, remember that reflects upon all of us. All of these instances tie back to your character and those fraternal values that you want to exhibit. Even if you didn't intend for a specific reaction, you really can't control how someone else is going to think. Think back to that video from the philanthropic event. If somebody misinterprets it, you can't control what they think. But then once somebody has a perception of you, it gets really hard to change it. Everything you put out online develops your social brand and your image. Some things will be out of your control. Maybe if you have a common name or your account gets hacked, but there's a lot that you can do to maintain your image, and that really includes reviewing the privacy settings frequently.
So privacy is really an interesting concept when it comes to the internet. While many sites offer privacy settings, it doesn't offer as much privacy as you'd think or want. Privacy settings can help limit who can see what, but there are many ways around those settings, and they frequently change. Facebook is notorious for constantly changing its privacy policy on users, oftentimes without us realizing. If someone wants to see what you posted, whether your account or a group is private or not, they can find a way. Let's talk through a scenario. Your account is private, but you allow me to follow you. Now I can see your private feed. So when you post something, I have the option to retweet, repost, or even screenshot and share your content. My feed is public, which now makes your post public. Even if they don't share it into their feed, one of your followers has your content. There's no telling what they may do with it. The Judiciary Committee receives a great deal of Snapchat and Instagram posts screenshotted by another user, most of which I guarantee the original creator never intended for us to see. Let's take a look at the Penn State chapter of Kappa Delta Rho as an example. This chapter had a private Facebook page where they cataloged pictures of unsuspecting naked women and ridiculed them, many of whom were passed out or in compromising positions. The page was also used to initiate drug deals and discuss hazing. A former brother took that information to the cops, and the chapter is now suspended with its members potentially facing charges for invasion of privacy. So before you go posting something, thinking your privacy settings will protect you, remember there are always ways around them.
Even while managing your privacy settings, it isn't always what you post that can be an issue. Oftentimes what your friends or other people post in response might be the controversial content. You might post a harmless image of yourself out on the beach during spring break, only to have a friend comment on it, "What a great night. We were so wasted." Another example is a friend posting on your wall a story about how you made a racial joke and how funny it was. While you didn't put that content out there, it's on your page and somebody else has linked it to you. If a friend makes an inappropriate comment on your page, it's okay to delete it. If they are continuously making these comments, consider changing what they can view on your page or even whether they're worthy of having as a connection. That counts for real life too as a friend. Just as in real life, it's important to periodically clean up your followers. It used to be more followers or friends on social networks. The more of those you had, the more popular you were, and the better your profile was. While people use social media for varying reasons, it's never a good idea to just accept everyone who wants to be your friend or follower. Even if you're using social sites professionally, some of the information you're giving out is personal information, such as where you live, work, go to school, and you want to make sure that the people that have that are people you know and you trust. As time passes, those who those people are might tend to change too. So as you're managing your friends list online, also consider that in person. The relationships with social media and networks itself will change. It doesn't do you any good to have a site that you aren't using. So if you aren't actively on a site, you also aren't actively monitoring what your friends might be tagging you in without you realizing it. If you aren't going to use the site anymore, end the relationship, delete the account. Now let's look at a few examples of social media mistakes and discuss how the individual or company could have handled the situation better in terms of etiquette and character.
Some of the biggest mishaps have been due to not considering the content. One of the most widely known cases was Justine Sacco. Justine was a 30-year-old senior director of corporate communications at a media company. She went to visit her family in South Africa on the holidays. On the final leg of her trip, she posted the following on Twitter: "Going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS. Just kidding, I'm white." Initially, nobody replied or commented back, and she didn't expect much. She only had 170 followers at the time. By the time she landed 11 hours later, her phone was blowing up with text and thousands of tweets, and she was a worldwide trend with her own hashtag, "Has Justine landed yet?" What she intended was a joke was actually a racist comment and infuriated many people. It not only caused her immense public shaming, but she also lost her job. A friend deleted her account, but as we've mentioned previously, her tweet lives on. The fact that I'm using her as an example shows it hasn't gone away, and it'll stay with her forever. This isn't the only instance, as many others have gained attention over something they didn't intend to be harmful, only a joke. A 22-year-old dressed up for Halloween as a Boston Marathon victim, and two others also posted pictures of their Halloween costumes as the burning Twin Towers. In these cases, the situation could have been avoided if the individuals had just reflected on their values before choosing their Halloween costume. Nothing about those posts exhibits strong values. And even if you think it's funny, consider your audience and whether or not it could be perceived as insensitive. It's extremely difficult to make any comments today without someone finding it offensive, but use your best judgment and err on the side of caution when deciding whether or not to post.
It's also important to know your facts before you say anything. Nothing is more detrimental than saying something without knowing the implications of what it actually means. In 2014, the hashtag Why I Stayed began trending on Twitter as a way to discuss domestic violence, and not knowing the context of the hashtag, DiGiorno jumped in and tweeted, hashtag Why I Stayed, you had pizza. Once realizing their mistake, DiGiorno quickly deleted the tweet and apologized for the mistake, rather than sidestepping it, as well as personally responding to dozens of Twitter users who were offended by the tweet. And while they handled the recourse in the best way they could, the whole problem could have been avoided with a little research. The same instance happened to Entenmann's Bakery in 2011. During the Casey Anthony trial, the hashtag #NotGuilty erupted, and the bakery tweeted, who's #NotGuilty about eating all the tasty treats they want, not realizing the hashtag was in reference to the trial. The difference between Entenmann's and DiGiorno is that while both apologized, Entenmann shut down their account for 2 years after their post, as opposed to acknowledging the guilt and moving forward to rebuild their brand. Trending topics and hashtags can be a great way to jump into a conversation if you're trying to build a following and increase your presence. But before using them, make sure you understand what they actually mean. If you aren't sure, don't post it. It's better to not post anything than have to play cleanup afterward.
Speaking of hashtags, many companies and organizations will create their own to try to engage more with their followers and create a community, sometimes for special promotions. That was the case with the New York Police Department and JP Chase. Both organizations created hashtags to interact with their followers and their community, but couldn't predict what the response was going to be. And in both cases, it wasn't good. NYPD was hoping to change the negative press the police all over the country were receiving, and prompted their followers to share a photo they had with a member of the department using the hashtag MyNYPD. Instead of getting positive images and a little free press along the way, it backfired, and people instead posted pictures of police brutality and only created further negative press. JP Chase did the same thing in 2013. They created the hashtag AskJPM for Twitter users to ask, what career advice would you ask a leading exec at a global firm? Instead of getting career questions, the company received responses such as the following. Did you have a specific number of people's lives you needed to ruin before you considered your business model a success? Or, can I have my house back? And what section of the poor and disenfranchised have you yet to exploit for profit, and how are you working to address that? What we can learn from both of these cases is you don't always have control over what's going to happen. When you put something out on the internet, you might get the response you're looking for, or you could get the exact opposite. Now, don't be discouraged and think that social media is only bad. There are a lot of instances where organizations have had great success with social media campaigns, despite the possible lack of control. The ALS Association raised $115 million from the hashtag IceBucket Challenge, and Coca-Cola's hashtag Share a Coke campaign saw over 125,000 posts, with 96% of them being positive sentiments. So it isn't always going to lead down a negative path. Just be prepared and make sure you're willing and able to handle whatever response you get.
Throughout this webinar, we focused on mishaps that originated online. But before we wrap up, I think it's really important to remember to maintain your values offline just as much as online. Not just because we should portray our values all the time, or because fraternity policy includes print materials as well, but because everything has the capacity to become digital media. Take the case of the fraternities who created sexually suggestive banners. While it's happened at multiple schools, the most recent case was at Old Dominion University, where Sigma Nu fraternity created banners reading "Freshman Daughter Drop-Off," among others. The chapter in question never intended, or maybe they did, but never intended for their banner to go viral or even end up on the internet, but other students and the media captured it and put it online anyway. Their actions caused such outrage on the campus that their chapter was suspended, and the media attention they gained was paraded online as an example of what not to do. Make sure anything you publish, print, or write is consistent with the image you want to portray. With the increase of camera phones and the ability to screenshot, you never know who is going to capture what you're doing or who they might share it with without you realizing or knowing. I've recently seen this by some suspended members of the fraternity that I work for submitting anonymous alerts of hazing or violations of fraternity policies on videos that they've captured. So I share that as anything we do offline can easily transition online. If you're tagged in an image or a comment that you don't want to be linked to, untag yourself. While it doesn't remove the image from the internet, it does at least eliminate it from being linked to your account. Once you untag yourself from a photo, only you are able to retag yourself in it. If the image is extremely inappropriate, you also have the ability and the right to flag it as inappropriate. Now, that doesn't mean that the content is guaranteed to be removed, but at least it sets the process in motion. And if it does violate the social media site's terms of agreement, if you're afraid of retaliation from a friend who posted it, the sites such as Facebook don't share information on the person who filed the report when they reached out to the person responsible. They will never know it was you who filed the complaint unless you tell them.
So to close out the content for today, let's recap some of the things you should and shouldn't do when it comes to online communication. Don't post anything illegal. Illegal drugs or underage drinking are just two examples. Do be sure to clean up your social network accounts before starting your job search. Don't post anything insensitive or racist. Do your research before using any trending hashtags. And don't be naive about possible recourse. And consider all possible responses before you post content. And most importantly, do keep your values in mind anytime you're creating content. I'll leave you with a quote by author Jon Acuff, and this is one of my favorites. Don't be an idiot online. The digital bridges you burn forever. With that, I'll hand the program back over to Mackenzie.
All right. Thank you so much, Allison and Andy. That was definitely a lot of information and going to wrap up the content portion of the program today. So now it's time to hear from all of our participants listening in from around the world. The program is now open to your questions and comments. As stated earlier, feel free to submit your questions via the questions box or on Twitter using the hashtag AKSciChat. Questions will be answered in the order they're received. Please be sure to introduce yourself, including your chapter or college, as you ask your question. Right now we're going to start off with the first question for today, and it's, I've already posted some questionable content and images. What should I do?
So I can field that one. I would say that's when you go back through and delete it, and also make sure it hasn't been shared among your other friends. But you certainly have a responsibility to go back and remove some of that content and images, just like I had mentioned, especially as you get ready to start your job search, your interviewing. You'll want to clean up all of your social media accounts.
Good. Anything to add to that, Andy?
Oh, that's a great answer, Allison.
All right, looks like our next question is going to be that it sounds like it's a lot of trouble to use social media. Is it better to just not have a social media presence at all?
If I
Andy,
can
you want
jump
to
in
take
on
that
that
one?
one, I
Yeah.
know, yeah, the job search stats from JobBite that we heard earlier in this webinar talked about some of the fallout that can happen if you use sites badly. I've also seen research from companies that say 60% of recruiters are going to be using social media sites at some point in the process. And it actually, of that 60%, they're actually making a decision based on what they see or don't see. And more often than not, it can help tip the scales in the right direction. So with that in mind, if you have a vision, if you have a direction that you're using your social media presence for, if it complements your brand, the fraternity's values, and what profession or career you're hoping to achieve, it will absolutely tip the scales in your favor if it comes down between you and another qualified candidate and you have this robust um, history of talking about the important things that are related to your industry. So you can absolutely use it to your advantage. I also recommend searching for keywords in your field of interest and following some of those thought leaders. You never know when an individual online might share a post of yours, or you might use a quote that they've shared, and it's kind of like a mini conference. So you're able to gain so much. So I think it just relates to using it to your advantage.
Good. That kind of ties into another question we have. It's that I'm actively looking for a job, so what can I do to get my social presence acceptable?
First, I would suggest you Google yourself. So see what's out there easily available, and not just the results that come back on the first page or even maybe the second page. So that's exactly what recruiters, including myself, will do as we're looking at candidates and reviewing resumes. So do a Google for yourself and see what comes up. Also remember that you can do a Google search on photos. So once I have seen a picture or I know the candidate that I'm looking at, I can do a Google search for photos and see what else is related to that. So again, this is where you want to be really, really careful about the photos you're posting to your social media sites. And then the friends list that we talked about a little bit earlier. Andy mentioned some great tips about following leaders in the industry that you're interested in. LinkedIn is a great site to do that and find them, reading articles, reading up on the industry and the company that you're interested in, and following them on social media as well. Of course, remember that opens you up to being followed back in return. But again, it's cleaning up your image and thinking about what would your boss think, your future boss think, or a family member that you respect and look up to, maybe mom. You want it to be above reproach. So that the things that come up is maybe I see where you led and took part in a group project on the topic, not the fabulous drunken spring break soiree that you just attended.
And good.
I think this is a great opportunity for you to, as Allison said, go back and clean up, but also if you have a blog or if you have spaces where you can share some of those projects that you worked on or those thoughts that you have about what's happening in the industry of interest, this is your time to write and provide a little bit of the extra critical thinking and demonstrate what you could bring to the table as a candidate that won't fit on the 1 or 2 pages of your resume. So if I were to go to your blog because that's what you've listed on your site and I see that the last 5 articles are thoughtful and they're related to the big industry trends and things people are talking about, again, I think we have a deeper follow-up conversation than I would with 80% of the candidates that would come through the door.
Good answers. We have another one here. As Alice and I both at least know, we have PVLI coming up as well as spring break. Does this mean that I can't post any pictures of my friends and I having fun?
I think the key word there is any pictures, and no, that doesn't mean you can't post any pictures. It means you really want to be thoughtful of the pictures you post and any tags or hashtags that you associate with those pictures. And just some examples. So spring break, you go to a fabulous beach vacation. Think about what a picture of maybe you and your friends in swimsuits on the beach, how would that look to a future employer? Is that something you want your future employer to see? I've had a couple of those pop up in my searches, and it's a little awkward. But still, that doesn't mean you can't post a great selfie with a beautiful beach in the background and having a good time, or 4 or 5 brothers all wearing letters during roll call at PBLI or participating in the sessions. The kind of pictures that are going to be harmful to you are anything where you're out with a group of friends with cups in your hand that nobody can necessarily tell what they are, but if it's a red Solo cup, the assumption is it's not Coca-Cola in that cup, or a beer bottle in your hand, or a martini glass, or whatever. While it seems very casual, and even if you are over 21, as Andy mentioned earlier, it just doesn't necessarily give off the best perception of who you are in your brand. It's that you're more interested in partying than being taken seriously as a candidate for a job or as an employee in the future.
Right, great answer. We have another question that came in. It says, officers change relatively often in our chapters, so how do we stay consistent between the different executive committees and kind of encouraging monitoring your social media?
I love that question.
Go ahead, Andy.
I would just say transition, right? It's hard to keep the business of the fraternity going. I've often seen fraternity-related social media accounts die after Susie PR star graduates or leaves her office. So it's like everything else that we do. If it's a priority, we've got to have a plan together. And we've got to make sure that we're on the same page in terms of what the organizational goals are with social media presence, because it's not that different than how we're communicating internally or what philanthropic events that we're working toward or professional development or speaker opportunities are around the corner. So prioritize it, and that goes the longest way.
And then to add on that, from a risk management standpoint of maybe this semester, quarter, or year's officers have been really good and aware of the content that's being posted either to the chapter website and are educating the members along the way. So there is a responsibility to make sure that there is continuing education on Alpha Kappa Phi's risk management policies, including our print and publication policy for all chapter members. So that can be incorporated into one of your first chapter meetings of each semester or quarter. Usually officer training, the different areas and regions will include that as their officer training as well. So that's just another resource to get the word out and help everybody, be compliant and put their best foot forward as individuals as well as brothers of AKSI.
Good. All right, looks like that's the last
Good point.
question
We
that we
constantly have.
All right, yeah,
I was
looks like
just
that was
saying
the
we
last
constantly have new members that we're orienting to the organization. So the more that we can remind people, there's a quote that I love related to risk management. Allison, you probably said it before. If we haven't told them in the last 6 months, we haven't told them. People have short memories. Risk management isn't like the reason that they join fraternal organizations. So be vigilant and keep educating our members.
Great, great stuff. Before we close off for the end of the night, Alice and Andy, do you have any final comments to our listeners today?
I just want to say something I had noticed, Mackenzie. I was looking through my Twitter feed, and I follow a number of AKSI chapters, and let me tell you, I can tell it's full rush season. I had one feed I looked at in the middle of the day, and I had 5 different chapters posting really positive tweets about their members, whether that was, thanking prospective Rashis for coming out to their event. One university had a brother elected president of the Student Activities Organization, and another was highlighting their brother of the week. So there are a lot of really great opportunities out there to promote our fraternity, as well as promote each individual brother using social media. So it's certainly not the gloom and doom, all of it, but we have to be aware of the potential downfalls when we're using social media, as well as the potential upsides.
Great answer. Andy, anything last comment?
Like anything else in business, if you have a plan and you work at it, it'll start to perform, and then set some high goals and some key performance indicators and see where you take it. But again, it's like everything else we do, it just has the opportunity to really help us or really visibly hurt us. So knowing that the fraternal world at times seems like we're under fire, this is one of our best platforms to tell our story, to own the narrative, to help people understand what a professional business fraternity is. So I challenge you all, encourage you all, connect with us, show us what you're doing great, and I think that will do wonders for Alpha Kappa Psi. Thanks so much for letting me join you tonight.
Great. Thank you both for joining us. That is the end of the session that we have for today. So again, thank you to our participants and all of our callers that have joined in the conversation tonight. For any additional questions or conversation, feel free to contact either of the presenters using the information provided on the screen. So one last time, I want to thank Alice and Andy for again their insight and their expertise on the topic. Finally, we have a bunch of upcoming programs that are listed on the aksi.org website. If you have any suggestions for future topics, please send